Good evening. I'm Maya Hasegawa, and it's 7:02, and I'm calling the meeting of the Development Review Board to order. For those of you who are first-timers, I have some opening remarks. If you've heard them before, you can kind of...
Tune out.
Yeah, until you have to swear your oath. At the DRB, we hear applications for land development in the town of Brattleboro and appeals of zoning administrator decisions. Procedurally, the Development Review Board operates on the record. Broadly, this means that we take a clear record of testimony from the applicant and any interested parties, and then issue a written decision with our findings. Applicants and members of the public should be aware that as we are on the record, this is your opportunity to comment on and provide evidence relating to the application. In the event our decision is appealed to the environmental court, the court will not take or consider additional testimony at its hearing, but will look at the evidence from our hearings, the regulations, and determine if the evidence supports the findings and decision of this board. That's why we're being recorded, and you have to speak into the mic if you make comments. Only interested persons that participate in this proceeding may appeal a decision made by the board, so I strongly urge all of you to speak up at this hearing. As we are on the record, I'm going to ask that you affirm your testimony will be truthful. So will the applicants and anyone wishing to speak, or if you even think you might speak, stand and raise your right hand.
You might speak, stand. You might speak, stand.
You will have to, you have
I
to,
have to do something?
are you going to
Standing
speak?
behind you.
I know, just,
Are you going to speak at the
are you
hearing?
gonna speak tonight?
I don't know.
Well, if you, even if you're not sure, stand and raise your right hand. I hereby affirm that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, under the pains and penalties of perjury. Say, I do. Thank you. Applicants require a majority of the full board to succeed. That is 4 votes out of 7. So we have 5 people here tonight. You need to get 4 votes out of 5. If we don't, because we don't have a full board, we'll consider a request to continue your application to the next public meeting, which will be the 17th of September. We also have one person who has agreed to watch the proceedings on television and call in his vote. And we probably have another person that would do the same.
Yep.
So you can start giving your presentation, and if it looks like you had, the votes might go against you, you can ask for a continuance. Okay. After taking testimony, the board will close the public hearing and may vote on your application. The board will issue a written decision within 45 days of the close of the hearing. While we may vote on an application, it is the written decision that controls the timeline for appeal. It should be noted that the town of Brattleboro is a party with an interest in land development applications. The town does not have a special status before this board, and documents provided to the board by the town planning department, town attorney, or other town departments will be considered in exactly the same way as information from the applicant and all other interested parties. Okay. So Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move.
Second?
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
I will abstain.
You're abstaining.
Yeah.
No, I'm.
Oh, Dave is
Yeah.
abstaining.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
I'll vote yes. So that's 4. 1 abstain. Okay. Brian, has the meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Are there any conflicts of interest from anybody on the board?
The only thing I can say is on 2018-98, I'm on the Board of Listers, and we saw this before for tax exemption in June. Was that right? Yeah, early June, so, but I have no conflict.
No ex parte communications about?
No.
Okay. David, you're appointed to hear everything? Okay, the first thing on the agenda is 2018-103 Insight Photography Project. And if you recall, that was the blade sign from last month. And the applicant has withdrawn the request for approval and is going to submit a modified design for administrative approval.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have to deal with the square footage or the blade sign.
Goody.
No math, Kathy.
That's great.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is 2018-98 Vermont River Conservancy Waterfront District. Yeah. Do you need something to,
Get one of those.
we have an
stands.
easel.
Yeah, I didn't bring one, sir.
Which one is the easel? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Looks like screens. That one.
Did you want some poster boards to put that up? Yeah, sorry, I didn't. Here, let me go back.
Alright. This may be a little wonky. Sure how it locks in, perhaps.
I don't think that works.
Yeah, I think you're just gonna be using one of these,
Yeah, I can,
whichever. We can put it at the highest level though. That might make sense. It's partly for us and partly for the camera people at home.
Brian, I'll be right back with the
Yeah.
poster board. So.
can I introduce myself and
Yes.
start? Okay.
Yep.
My name is Steve Libby. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont River Conservancy. This is a project that began with a study of post-Irene economic impacts on downtown Brattleboro called the VERY study, which you may or may not be familiar with. But it's basically a study to look at what were the priority projects that could be taken on to reduce flood vulnerability in downtown Brattleboro. And this particular property, it's officially known as 250 Birge Street. It was the Sosasimo Lumber Company storage yard off of William Street. And we were asked by the Brattleboro Conservation Commission and the Planning Department to help out with the acquisition of this property and with the restoration of the floodplain on this property. So we've been working on this for the past 4 years, and we're now, as of last October, Vermont River Conservancy purchased the property from the Sosasimo Lumber Company, and we're now in the process of doing the final design and permitting for the project.
get that okay?
So this is a site plan of the property. The Whetstone Brook is in blue here. This is the upstream end that flows in this direction. The dark line here is the property boundary. It's about 12.2 acres. Majority of the property is on the south side of Whetstone Brook. There's a small portion of the parcel on the north side. Over the last 100 years, this property has been used for different kinds of wood products production. There's a sawmill on the site. It's known, I guess, locally as Sawdust Alley because of all of the different wood products industries that have gone on there. And over time, the natural floodplain of this area was filled with gravel to raise the elevation of the site so that it didn't flood during flood events, and it was useful for the wood products industry. And like I said, most recently, Sosasumo Industries used this as a storage yard for lumber that was part of their kiln drying operation down here. So the plan is to remove that imported fill and reduce the elevation of this property back close to its original floodplain elevation, so that when Whetstone Brook floods, which it does frequently, this area will absorb water, floodwaters. We're going to actually reduce the elevation between 4 and 8 feet, depending on where we are on the property. It's about 40,000 cubic yards of material that will be removed. And the end product will be a ecologically properly restored floodplain, and it'll also be a recreational area for the town, so kind of an open space recreation area. It won't have any structures like ball fields, that sort of thing, but really an open space for people to use passively. The plan right now is to have a small parking area at the upstream or downstream end of the property that would be off of Birge Street, like I think a 6-car parking area here, and then a trail that would kind of loop through the property that would be just a walking trail for folks. The plan is to also revegetate the property once it's regraded with vegetation that would be appropriate for a floodplain area. So we know what type of floodplain vegetation you would naturally find, and so we're going to try and work to revegetate it with that material. There's also a existing wetland area on this southern edge of the property, this green area here. That's a jurisdictional wetland. State controls the use of that, and that's going to be restored. It's been basically, there's a fair amount of kind of junk in there that will be removed, and it will continue to operate as a floodplain, as a wetland area. Kind of the third element is up at this upstream end. There's a purple area here on the map, and that's, we're going to propose building a small stormwater retention pond. There's a very steep stream that comes down from the upper end of the property here, and basically comes right down the fall line and enters Whetstone Brook right here. And that carries a lot of street runoff and a lot of pollutants that are associated with that kind of urban runoff. And the idea is to redirect that through a sedimentation pond here, so that when the water flows down into this area, it'll have a chance to slow down and sediment will drop out. And then redirect the flow from the sedimentation pond through this wetland complex for more attenuation of nutrients and sediment and that sort of thing. So the plant, it will result in a better water quality for Whetstone Brook. So those are basically the 4 elements: restore the floodplain, restore the wetland, create the stormwater mitigation system here, and create a passive recreation area. So that's kind of the overview of the project. Where we are right now is during the process of purchasing the property, we had what's called a phase 1 environmental assessment done to look for any hazardous materials. This type of site is prone to some kind of contamination because of its industrial background. So the phase 1 study did turn up a low level, at that point, was considered to be a low level contaminated of what are called PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. They're a type of pollutant that you find in most urban areas. It's basically whenever there's any combustion going on, it's the sort of residue from that combustion. So it could be from diesel exhaust, from the trucks that were in here. It could be from, who knows historically what kind of burning went on this property. So the first assessment of that indicated that the PAH levels were above the urban limit. Subsequent to that, the state changed the rules on what the threshold levels were, and at this point, the PAH levels are below the urban level. So if the soils were left here on site, they would not cause any hazardous materials jurisdiction by the state. We, on the other hand, know that we're going to remove those soils and move them somewhere else. So if those soils are moved to another urban area, there will be no state oversight. But if the soils are moved to a non-urban area, then the state's going to take jurisdiction about what's called the receiving site will be. So we don't know at this point where the soils are going to go because we haven't, that's part of the bidding process for doing this work. But we're prepared that if the soils are going to move to a non-urban location, it will go through the proper procedures with the Department of Environmental Conservation folks. We've received a EPA grant to clean up the contaminated soils, or the soils that were designated to be contaminated. There's about, of the 40,000 yards, about 10,000 are contaminated. They're mostly at this end of the property. So we've received the EPA grant to do that work, and that's part of why we're here today, is beginning the permitting process to allow that work to go forward. We've also applied for a FEMA grant to remove the rest of the soils, and we just heard that this project was chosen as a top state project from the FEMA funding point of view to go now to the federal level for consideration. So we are cautiously optimistic that we will also receive money from FEMA to do the work. So it's, at this point, fully funded, or potentially fully funded with federal grants. We have already purchased the property with a Vermont Housing Conservation Board grant and some other funding. So we're, it's about where we are today. Yes.
That 10,000 yards, what's in that?
That's those PAH, the
Okay.
PAHs, yeah.
Okay.
And those are the ones, if we left them in place, they are below the
Yeah.
urban threshold.
Okay, I'm fine.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. The 5 parking spaces, 6 parking spaces, whatever.
There, we're showing 5 right now.
One of those will be handicap accessible?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, that was one of the, from our point of view, one of the important elements of this project was to have a place that is accessible to people with different abilities. And so this parking area here, and there's basically a gravel roadway that will be built along here to access the stormwater treatment area down here. And that'll be finished, it's a flat grade, it'll be finished with material that will allow for someone to, move mobility devices along that. So be able to access the whole property, basically.
So if we were to get, unfortunately, have hit with another Irene, what will this do?
So another Irene's an extreme event. So
Yeah,
it's-
well, there's gonna be a
so
lot more extreme
we
events.
figure, we're estimating there'll be about 40 acre feet of water storage in here when it's restored.
Mhm.
So 40 acre feet is, it's kind of an abstract term to get your head around, but it's, 10, average of 4 feet of depth over 10 acres.
Mhm.
So that's, a significant amount of water that can be stored on here during a flood event. What would happen, quite frankly, during another Irene event is this would get filled up fairly quickly.
Mhm.
And it wouldn't, have a really significant impact on downtown Brattleboro. What I think this is designed more for is those smaller storms in between the extreme Irene events. Like right now, it's designed for a 10-year flood and a 100-year flood. So a flood that you would see recurring on average once every 10 years would fill up the area to about this line here, and then a larger flood would fill up the area from here to this part here. So, yes.
Was Irene considered a 500-year, or what was Irene?
Yeah, I don't.
It's about, at this particular segment, it was about a little bit less than a 50-year storm.
Okay.
Yeah. So another thing that this site will do during a flood event is, when the water comes kind of screaming down around the corner here,
Right.
it'll slow down when it hits this area. And part of the function of this is for a place for like large woody debris, like trees that are coming down here, may have a chance to settle out in this area before they sort of come into the downtown area and clog up bridges and that sort of thing. So that's one of the natural floodplain functions, a place to collect that kind of debris coming down.
Could I ask a question, Brian? Is the town that you're aware of have any plans for that William Street Bridge? I'm just thinking it was interesting because we had the project in West Brattleboro where the Brattleboro Housing Authority is getting rid of properties to try and reduce, and we discussed at that point that bridge over Western Avenue is a choke point, and I'm thinking this William Street Bridge is probably another choke point. Does the town have any discussion, or?
Which one, the Elliott Street one downstream of it, or the?
No, the one
is
upstream.
Upstream of it. I think one of those bridges has a sediment plug, which is a project that's been identified for mitigation, but beyond that, I haven't
What is
seen it.
sediment plug?
It's clogged up with sediment underneath it.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious because it's interesting how, we had the Brattleboro Housing Authority that's doing some flood mitigation upstream. You folks are coming in with this proposal for flood mitigation. I mean, I'm just curious if the town has some thoughts about those bridges as being sort of choke points when there are flood events.
Yeah, well, most of the damage was, there was a lot of damage downstream of that and made the road impassable, but,
Okay. Yeah, I remember the damage on William Street
Yeah.
that was upstream of this.
Yeah.
And also right in that general area.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I think the most, immediate damage reduction from this project will be along William Street on this side. Because right now the river because it's filled in here, the river stays in its channel during these high events, and there's a lot of energy that gets pushed against this outside of this curve right here. So by having this broader area for the river to kind of flow into, it'll reduce a lot of that energy and hopefully reduce that impact on right where William Street goes, right along the river line there.
Can you talk about your landscaping plan?
Yeah, so right now the plan is to, there's some existing large trees along the bank here. And we're hoping, and we believe that we can leave a lot of those trees when we reduce the elevation. We'll have to play it a little bit by ear, to see if we need to leave little soil islands around the trees. But those trees we recognize the importance of those both to help stabilize the bank, but also to provide shade for the river. So that's another, kind of one of our ecological goals is to keep these rivers shaded and keep the water temperatures down. So these larger trees along here, we are definitely going to try and retain. Revegetating the site after the excavation work is done, the simplest thing is to plant it with some kind of conservation mix, which is a type of mix of grass seed, and that comes in quickly, provides some immediate kind of stability to the soil. One of the challenges with this site will be how to control the Japanese knotweed that's likely to invade the site afterward. And I don't have a great answer for that, because nobody has a great answer for that. There are some places where if you can sort of deal with the knotweed before it gets established, then other species can come in and compete with it. There's no guarantees. But we're very aware of that aspect of revegetating a site like this. So I don't know exactly how we're going to treat that, but that's something we'll definitely work with the town on and work with other folks on to come up with some kind of a revegetation system that helps reduce that initial kind of invasion of the Japanese knotweed, and in the long run allows what would be ideally some kind of a floodplain forest to evolve in here. I mean, that's what it was before it was developed. It was a floodplain forest. And if we can, over decades, get it back to that, then that would be ideal. We also know that there's a lot of interest in the kind of the passive recreational use of this area. So we want to have an open dialogue with the community about kind of like, should there be some areas kept open and maybe mowed periodically for people to throw frisbees around, run your dog around. So there's some open, some flexibility on that aspect of it. But it will be completely revegetated, at the very least with a conservation mix.
So the parking that's going to be there, is that going to be there mainly for access for people who want to use the trail?
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah,
it
it's
basically
there
comes
now.
off of Birge
Yeah.
Street right here, yeah.
You're talking about, and you'll use the existing
I'm
lot.
sorry, what?
You'll be using the existing lot.
There's sort of a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's sort of an area where people come in, so it's located close to that area.
Yeah.
There's a fence a gate right about here that we now have locked. But when this is all done, this will be open to the public. So yeah, it'll be in that kind of, right when you go through the gate, there's sort of that open area.
And you're not going to have any lighting, so it'll be
No lighting.
day use only.
Days, yeah.
And signage, informational signs. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, oh, definitely. So we'd like to have near the parking area some kind of a simple signboard, kiosk, maybe a signboard with maybe a little roof on it that talks about what's the role of this property from a flood resilience perspective. We've had a lot of interest from the educational program. So we had this really great Montessori school class come down and kind of look at how they would redesign this place. They just did a fantastic job. So we think that one of the users of this place will be schools in the area to see this is what we need to know and what we need to do to become more flood resilient is restore these type of places. So some kind of signage that could tell that story. I don't think much more than that.
But there are certain guidelines, for size sign and type and all that, and we can make that a condition that they be administratively approved.
Sure.
So that you don't have to come back about
Okay.
signs.
That'd be great.
Quick question. There's existing water main there and sanitary. Are those going to, with the excavation, is that going to affect that at all?
Yeah, no, we've nailed down the invert elevations of those, and they basically run across the property right about
Yeah.
here. So this is the least amount of excavation up at this end of the property. And the plan is to protect those, armor the upstream side of those pipes with large stones, so that if the river ever does, which it may do, this is
Yeah.
a river that is pretty volatile here, that those will be protected. We don't have the final design done yet on this, but that would be one of the elements of the final design. And we would certainly want that to pass muster with the Public Works Department.
I guess the follow-up question then would be, not only is it protecting it when you're excavating it, but some consideration for Public Works to have access to it once the
Yeah.
site is final. Does that make sense?
Public Works now has a right-of-way.
Okay.
It's a formal right-of-way they have, so that right-of-way won't change under changing ownership.
I'm just imagining a sort of a kind of a level approach to if they need to get to it. you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, it will be,
Okay.
yeah.
So you will be applying for a state wetlands permit?
Correct. State wetlands, we're having it reviewed by the state archaeologist. The other state permits that we'll be acquiring.
Any other questions from the board?
What was the name of the study that was the post-Irene? How was that?
It's called, we call it VERI, it's kind of the acronym, Vermont Economic Resilience Initiative or something like that.
Okay.
It was commissioned by the Agency of Commerce and Community Affairs, Community Development, and they picked a number of towns around the state and did this kind of like post-Irene assessment of what would be the, like, it was pretty specific, and that, again, that's where this particular project was identified as the top priority, is to restore this footprint.
Bike rack. Will you be putting a bike rack in the parking lot?
Be happy to.
Would we make that a condition?
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that well, not the only, but we're limited on putting any permanent structures in, things that have permanent foundations, because it's a floodplain. We don't want to be putting in expensive infrastructure that might get threatened by flood. But a bike rack, something that sits on the ground, worst case scenario, gets moved by a flood and be replaced.
Any other questions?
Mike, do we have anyone in the audience?
I'm gonna
Oh,
ask. Is there anybody here to speak to this project?
Okay, thank you.
What?
Nothing. Just the conditions that we would want with it.
Yeah, we have to, there are conclusions that we have to reach. If you look on Brian's thing.
Just looking at that.
And I guess I'll read them for the record.
Yeah, she agreed.
Based on the foregoing findings of fact, the Brattleboro Development Review Board does or does not conclude that the proposed project will meet the standards for site plan approval of section 434 of the Brattleboro Land Use Regulation. And I did look that up.
I didn't bring my book. 434 is what we're looking at first.
It seems to be you can correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but that's the general, we prove that it meets the requirements of what the town would require for a project like this. The next finding of fact is section 436, which is local Act 250 review. Will it have any impact on the municipal what's the word? Utilities and for the schools or anything like that, and I don't think this will. 435. And it meets the conditional use approval, is Brattleboro zoning regs. And then, does it meet the standards for riparian areas, which is 334. Did you find it?
Yeah. Can we ask Brian again? It appears to.
Yeah, so in the draft decision, basically all the review criteria for all those different requests are kind of incorporated. I don't think it necessarily flagged everything as what particular review, so I don't think all of them are flagged for riparian review.
That has to do with access and spreading water and floodplain, which we've talked about. You see anything?
I don't see any concern.
And it meets the standards for wetlands and vernal pools approval. And we're adding and flood hazard, which we've talked about. We've talked about all of those, and I think they're covered. Okay, so in addition to the, anybody have any comments? In addition to the need for state, all the appropriate state permits is one of the conditions. And the exterior lighting, which you're not gonna have, so we don't need to talk about exterior lighting. You need to work with Public Works to deal with the sewer and water lines. A ring or similar bike rack has to be installed. And you have to have an erosion control plan. And the stormwater collection, treatment, and control system shall be properly operated and maintained. An inspection shall be conducted between the conclusion of spring snow melt and June 15th of each year to make sure that it's working properly. And we talked about the town of Brattleboro having access to the property. And all dead and dying landscaping must be replaced within a planting season. So that means if anything new that you put in,
Yeah,
because you talked about dogwoods and some other things
yeah,
in your.
okay, so plant material like shrubs and trees, not grass and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Okay.
And we agree that the administrator can do sign approval as a condition. Did I leave anything out?
So moved. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Great, thank you very much.
Can I ask just one informational question? That concept you brought up of finding a plant that would sort of muscle out the Japanese knotwood. Is there such a plant? The idea of putting in this plant to sort of preempt the
Yeah.
invasive?
You know, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, right now, if you go down there,
Yeah.
it's been 2 or 3 years since there was any work, and the poplars are coming in pretty well.
So maybe the poplars are the native that would
Yeah.
potentially.
So I sort of, see what's working.
Yeah.
I think if you could shade it out, you'd win.
Is that part of it?
Yeah, although we've seen knotweed growing up under trees and.
So you rip it up, it floats downstream and just resettles itself.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah. Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
I love the AC in this place.
I know, it was hot, now it's cold.
Yeah.
The next thing on the agenda is 2018-109, Brattleboro Union High School District 6.
Larry, I think you might need to do the avowal. The avowal.
Oh, yes. You weren't here when we.
No, I was not.
Okay.
Swear in.
Can swear you in. I
Yes,
have to
she's gonna
swear
swear
you
you
in.
in.
Oh, okay.
So you raise your right hand. I hereby affirm that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury.
Thank you. By the way, for the record, my name is Robert Clark. I'm the facility manager for Brattleboro Union High School District Number 6.
I know that.
Okay.
I was going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves.
And my name is Tony Wonsteski. I'm senior engineer with SVE Associates here in Brattleboro, helping Robert with this minor grading application and benefits that'll help the school. So, sure, everyone's familiar with the high school, baseball field, track, football field, new tennis courts. A lot of these facilities were put in a permit back in 2004. And presently, there's a practice field right here in this area. And that practice field cannot be striped for games at this point because it's missing some additional length, and I'll get into that. And without it being able to be striped for games, it really has a problem or puts strain on the athletic programs of the high school. So our work is really confined to this little area right here, which would be in the southwest corner of that practice field. So back in 2004, the school received permits to do a number of things. One of the tennis courts are here, this is the track, this is that wooded area. The original plan was back then to grade it out pretty close to the property line. So this shaded area is a 2-to-1 slope that was proposed back in their original permitting. Because of funding as the project went forward, my understanding is that they were running out of funds, so they had to cut the grading short. This is a fill, this is an existing slope that sloped away. So in order to make those fills, they had to bring in fill to make that work. So the existing slope is identified by this red line. So you can see if we stripe a field that will get, it's not an Olympic-sized soccer field, but a usable soccer field, lacrosse and field hockey, we would need dimensions that are like that. So look over this slope, and I said this is tree. And there's a group that did a ropes course, so if anybody's ever been back in here, you'll see they've got these ropes and things. So what we're proposing to do is just to extend this really from that slope back to the top at the corner here, about 50 to 60 feet. That would give us enough room to stripe that corner there. With the proposal, we're also, some of the track facilities like the old discus and shot put areas are older now. So we're going to update those, put the shot put in this lawn area that exists today, and then reconfigure and set a new discus area here. The field will stay as it is to date. There's no lighting proposed with this. There's no new impervious areas. I mean, the existing parking exists, access to the field exists. All we're trying to do is expand it enough to be able to strike the field, to be able to play games on the field. So in order to make that work, there's an existing 2-to-1 slope where they dropped it off and then it feathers back into the ground over here. We're going to extend that 2-to-1 slope out for about 120 feet, make a turn just to give us some room in here, and then we're going to go 3-to-1 slope here and tie back into natural. So that means we're going to clear some trees in that area. And we're going to bring in about 520 cubic yards to make this work. When we do that, everything's draining this way, so we're going to eliminate the catch basin that's here at the existing top of slope, move it over to the top of slope here, and then reconnect it to the existing storm drain system. All lawn, it's all going to be turf. So all of this area up on top that we disturb will be turf grass. That'll be there for play. The slope here, we will have a slope grass on that. And that's really the vegetation on the slopes. Now, one thing we don't meet by the zoning in this section, I think it's 314, right, is the buffer and the screening setback. In the land use regulations, it requires a 10 in the zone requires a 10 to a 15-foot buffer here with planting in that strip. We're making a proposal to ask the board for a waiver to allow us to go to a less slope, which would meet building code requirements, a 5-foot buffer of natural buffer there, and do our screening up on top of the slope. If you go down the street and you look behind these yards, it's wooded and it's a fairly steep slope. To put the 10 or 15 in here, we would have to build a retaining wall here, which would be a significant cost to this project. Because if we go over at a 2-to-1 and we do 10 feet, that wall is going to be 5 to 6 feet exposed, another 4 feet in the ground, you know. So it's a fairly tall wall. If we go to 15 feet, then we've even got, because we can't pinch anymore because we won't make the geometry of the field. So what we're proposing to do is to, at the top of the slope, we've got some other infrastructure. This is the catch basin I was talking about, the new line, is we're going to bring a new fence along the top of the slope, tie it into the security fence that runs through the woods, and extend it to catch balls from going off the edge of the field. That's a 8-foot tall fence right now, 8-foot tall fence. In front of the fence, to our butters to the south, we're going to plant 32 dark American arborvitae here in front of the fence. So what that'll do is provide screening. It'll also provide noise attenuation. It'll also provide another method for stopping the balls at the top of the slope. We think this is a much better look for our neighbors to the south. If we were to plant it here, they probably wouldn't see it, and they'd see the fence at the top of the slope. In the winter time, obviously. So being up on top, I think that'll screen it. It'll be a much better look. And that's our proposal to the board. During construction, this will be a fairly quick project because it's not, I mean, the work is to remove trees, clear and grow it, show in the existing slope, bring in fill, create the slopes, fine grade it, bring in the, I mean, before fine grading, do the storm drain, fine grade it, loam and seed it, and then plant our arborvitaes and put the fence in, and we're essentially done. So it's a fairly quick project. But because it's going to be exposed soils, we want to protect our neighbors. We have a double row of BMPs along the toe of this slope. It'll either be silt fence and straw wattle, or silt fence and straw bales. When we bid, we'll give that option to the contractor on how they want to do that. The slope, because it's 2-to-1 and 3-to-1 in this area, once we get it loamed and seeded, the plans call out for a straw blanket that will be stapled into the slope to keep that soil there. Once the catch basin, in, we'll either do fiber roll around that, or we'll put a silt sack in that catch basin to prevent any, if we have a heavy rain when it's, you know, newly graded, we want to protect those facilities so we don't get sediment into the stormwater. That's essentially the project and what we're proposing. As I mentioned earlier, the importance of this is that it was a practice field, it's used as a practice field. They're beginning to get constraints on the availability of the fields, and to be able to do this minor grading and give the school another field that they can actually hold games on is a huge benefit to the school and the athletic department. And that's our proposal, and thank you for your time and considering this application.
Any questions?
Yeah, I took the kids out of the house today and we went and checked it out. I said, I gotta see what this looks like. It did seem like there was a lot of woods. I didn't get to the ropes course there.
Yeah, it's on the.
Are you, I mean, presumably, when you're taking down trees, there's still gonna be a wooded area
Oh,
there.
there's quite a large
Okay.
area that'll stay.
Okay,
Yes.
I just,
Uh-huh.
that was like, oh, that's what I thought was some nice looking,
Yeah,
maybe
no.
oaks that would probably
Yeah.
have to come
You
down.
know, we looked at a bunch of different scenarios. We looked at 3 of going back to this kind of a graded field to give them maximum benefit on the
Okay.
property.
Okay,
We looked at doing the slope as we did here, and we also looked at retaining walls in here.
okay.
And they're, I think we're estimating $100,000, we can get what we want. We
Yeah.
can still keep the ropes course and keep the trees.
Yeah,
I mean, we can spend $500,000 and do the whole thing, but it's not required. Why would you do that?
and you lose the trees.
You lose all those trees.
Yeah, I just like the idea of you keeping some of the trees.
Oh, yeah.
How-
No, we're
how many-
only taking a wedge, like that, from that existing top of slope to that, it's 60 feet.
Yeah, because I noticed there's a fence, the fence here, I guess that would be south.
Yeah,
Like you could see there's sort of a break in the fence, and I said, well, is this where
yeah.
is this where, you know, the people in the neighborhood have made a trail? But it wasn't really a trail.
No, it's not. I don't know.
There's
if
no
the
real
kids
trail there.
Sneak up there, they probably did at one time, but this is the existing conditions plan, so you
Yeah.
can see the tree line, you can see the fence really goes like that on top, so we'll keep that same thing, we'll keep it on top, and we'll tie into this fence here for security, but also to keep the balls up on the field so that they're not, like I'd say, somebody with a strong foot might not kick it over the top of their arborvitae's, but,
So
that's
the
cool.
trees that are coming down will be in that
That'd
little
be in this little
section
triangle
right in
space
there.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About how many
Just that
trees are we talking about?
Oh, I don't know, I don't know. I venture a guess on it, I mean, I could walk out there and probably do a rough count, but, I mean, it's not super thick in there, when you were out there, it's not super thick.
No.
It's, you know, it's a good stand of woods in there.
Yeah. There might be a few sad squirrels, but,
Yeah, well, you know, maybe they'll.
actually they're oaks.
Yes.
To
So,
relocate.
there'll be a lot, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of trees that will remain, we're not
And the
even coming close.
The mention of the arbor, what was the term?
Arborvitae?
Those are a type of landscaping evergreen?
Yes, they are,
They're
they're,
the
taller.
conical.
yes.
And those are chosen to have that sort of buffering even when the other trees lose their leaves.
That's correct,
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay.
But, I mean, in the fields, you're not doing anything really in the fields during the winter months anyways. I mean, it's for fall and spring.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a big need for lacrosse. Lacrosse seems to be a really
Yeah.
excitable sport.
And the
Kids wanna
Principals
do it.
Association has now introduced, the ultimate frisbee is now a recognized sport that we have to provide for. And I think it's very popular. To add to the lacrosse, the soccer, field hockey.
Yeah. Could I ask a question, Brian, is, this waiver is within our purview. Right, we don't have I mean, we obviously have some limits we go against, we couldn't create waivers in certain cases.
Sure, no, you can definitely modify it to meet the conditions of the site, and particularly saying it's an RA developed site. Also, they're proposing a seed mix on the slopes that will eventually naturalize and create a natural looking buffer, which will add to it. It's just they can't meet the planting out of mature specimens
Right.
on that slope. It's just won't be successful.
So that's the key reason for the waiver, is that they have the limitation with this proposal of putting in mature trees, essentially.
Yeah, putting it on a 2-to-1 slope with mature bushes, it would be really hard to keep them irrigated.
Okay. So that's the sort of the key reason for the requesting a waiver, am I correct on that?
I would say it's a key reason for maybe granting a waiver.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
That was my question.
Yeah. Because you're doing work on an existing site, do you have vehicle charging stations, electric vehicle charging stations?
At the school,
There is
in
no
any of
vehicle
the-
charging stations at the school.
Okay. So if you have more than 40 parking spaces, which you do, you're supposed to have at least one vehicle charging station per 20 parking spaces. And since you're redeveloping the site, even though you're not near the parking area, you're still working on the entire, if you take the site as an entirety. So you're going to have to put in at least 2 charging stations to start with. And eventually you'll have to have, over the next 10 years, you have to add however many a year you have to have to get to 1 per 20 spaces.
this project would trigger the need to continue that over
Yes.
that many years. That might just kill the project.
Yeah.
It's not, it's a $100,000 project. To put that on the school district would probably, they probably wouldn't go forward with it.
You can modify that to whatever you think is reasonable, because it's an already developed site, so.
Do we have, I'm just curious about 2 questions about that. Let's say SIT was still operational and they asked to do a site plan, and they obviously have probably 40 parking spots. Would there be a similar situation?
They already have a charger.
Oh, okay.
There's also a state program that's doing grants for chargers right now for large employers. So that's something the school could go into, and it will pay for the expense of the charger.
And I gladly accept that information.
Yeah, so I'll give that
I'm
to
not
you.
opposed to it, I'm just very sensitive to the school budgets
Oh, yeah.
and the new funding and so the main, there's 3 main goals here in this project was to keep the cost down. The taxpayers already have enough on their plate, they don't need any big projects right now. The other thing is to serve the kids, the needs of the kids. We're gonna be losing Farmallard Field. We don't know when, but it's inevitable, it's been up for sale. You can see the field is being reused, they have solar panels and they have different ideas. The soccer games that were held up there, now that they've created no parking rules, so you have to like walk there, but the parents can't go see their children if they have a vehicle way to go to school. And they're walking through neighbors' yards, and it's not conducive to a good program. There's no facilities for them. We're bringing our kids back to our facility, locker rooms, bathrooms.
So if we make a condition that you explore getting a grant.
Oh, I'm for
and-
that.
And
That would be acceptable.
and then work with the administrator about putting in the charging station.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea.
Can we do that, Brian?
Yeah, definitely.
Can I ask
Would
which,
that sound like an okay condition to put in?
yeah, which section does this, it says 3113I, is that correct? Development that will create more than 40 parking spaces for residents and employees must provide at least 1 electrical vehicle charge.
Per 20.
Yeah.
But we would interpret this development to create more than 40 parking, did you follow what I'm saying here?
No, they already have more than 40.
But see, that's my understanding, is this development isn't triggering the creation of parking spaces.
No, but
When you
it's-
need a major site plan,
Yeah.
means that you have to bring your site into conformance with the parking regulations. to
So
an
when he
extent.
brings in this map of the practice field, we actually need to look at the entire school property as one.
The entire property, but again, it's a developed site, so you can modify the
And the-
requirement as you
And the
think
whole
is
thing is a
reasonable.
PUD, so,
What is the PUD?
planning.
But do you see what I'm trying to say is what,
Yeah.
was this requirement not in place in 2004 when the school spent millions of dollars updating their building?
No.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, and there's no consideration that if someone had an electric vehicle, they could park it over at Market 32 and walk to the school. Again, I just.
You could not have parking lots at the school at all and have people park there and walk. You know, it's a convenience matter.
I'm a little bit surprised, like Mr. Clark is, that coming to us for a practice field somehow triggers, you know, I mean, that parking lot was paved, when I went to school, it was a dirt pit. I'm just curious as to when. I mean, I just wanna know, is the board, we're in agreement that if they come to us to change the practice field, it triggers this electric car thing? We
Yeah,
are.
it does.
Okay, I was surprised.
Yeah.
All right.
You have if you flip back, you have an actual picture of the entire,
I do.
Yes.
I'm
yes.
sorry. Thank you.
So where's the park? If I know the parking is over
There's some parking
right
here.
there, right,
There's
Middle
parking
school.
here, and majority of parking's up in that.
right at the
portion.
curve, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So this is all, you know, I mean, the kids, this is the walkway. This is where we would come in for construction in between the track and
Yeah.
to get out here to do that work. And that's how the kids get out to use the field.
Mhm.
Because this is, the track's all fenced. The tennis court's all fenced.
So we'll just make a condition
To-
that.
to work with the
To work
administrator
with the
for-
administrator and
so the
apply
grant.
for a grant, to put in at least 2.
Yeah, we would work with the administrator. We think it's a great idea. If we tie it to this project, it's such a small project that, and the money would, it would hurt this project.
All right, the other consideration, the other design guideline that would kick in would be for changing to LED lighting. And again, that's something where grant funds are available, so instead of having a direct requirement that they do LEDs, we
In
have to
the
require
outside
that.
parking lots,
Yeah,
we've done that.
oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great, no problem.
Well, and we don't have to talk about it, that was gonna be the next thing.
I do know where I can get 30,000 cubic feet of uncontaminated,
Yes,
I heard that
field.
earlier.
I know, 30,000.
I
And there's
just got
no
big on that.
contamination in that, so.
Dirt's cheap, hauling isn't.
That's right.
Dirt's cheap.
That's right.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about lights, there's no 250 impact, section 250 impact.
The other consideration that I spent a lot of time on was the ropes course in itself. The original project removed the ropes course and all that wooded area down back. And I'm a minimalist. I wanted just what we absolutely need and no more than that. Because there are some community, there are people in the community, I'm not quite sure what the groups are, they really aren't affiliated with what I know there, but I know it is used, and Hi-Fi was there just the other day doing some work down there and trying to make it safe and inspecting the trees and so forth. So to some people, that's a very important area. So I think this plan is very sensitive to that and not encroaching upon that.
Okay, what would be the impact on the community around that as far as construction is concerned? I mean,
Well, you get the normal construction. I mean, it'd be restricted by times that they could be out there constructing, which, Brian, the board could have that as conditions on times to work. But, I mean, it's general construction. It's a fairly small project. It won't take long to do this. But there, you'll have the normal construction. I mean, to do something like, you'll have trucks bringing in fill. You'll have some bulldozer work and probably some excavator work for the storm drain. So those are bucket loaders, so you'll have those types of heavy equipment for the short duration of building this.
How many yards are you bringing in?
About 520,
520, so that's not,
25, 30 trucks.
that's where I was going.
It's not huge,
Yeah,
Okay.
but, you know, it is an impact, but it's temporary. Once, you know, I mean, there won't be more kids, or because the kids are there, I mean, so it's just a temporary construction impacts, and then it'll be back to normal.
Right, and these are strictly daytime use
Oh,
because
yes,
there's no
yeah.
lighting, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no night games, huh?
No,
Are there any people here that want to speak to the project? Any comments? Anybody? No? Okay. So we're going to add the following conditions. That the steep slope vegetation and cover be administratively approved when you finally decide what you're gonna put there, be administratively approved by the zoning administrator.
okay, I believe it's shown on the plan right now,
Yeah.
what we're planning on doing, but yes, so Brian can approve that, yeah.
And we don't have to have, we can drop the condition on the LED lights.
Mm-hmm.
And you're gonna work on the grant and work with the administrator on the 2 charging stations.
Excuse me, what was the name of it?
The charging stations, you'll work with.
Oh, yeah, I
with
thought
the
you said it's something
administrator.
like Project Solutions or something?
No, you'll apply for a grant.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, sorry. And if you decide at some point to put in lights, that has to be a separate
Yeah.
request.
Yeah.
It has to come back.
Yep.
And do we want to put conditions on working hours for the construction? Anybody?
actually, it's on the town ordinances anyways, so.
I can tell you, it's gonna be real sensitive because with all the children and so forth, when we do construction, we're pretty careful with scheduling and how we work those.
That's right, school starts in 2 weeks, right?
There
Less
are,
than
no, the
2
teachers that are already all there and
They were moving in today, I saw some of them.
Next Thursday?
we've had a lot of meetings. The first day is the 30th.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Is there a motion to approve it with the conditions?
So moved.
So, second?
All in favor?
Hey,
Aye.
Right.
good luck.
All right.
Thank you very much for your
Sure.
time.
So when are you gonna start?
We have to go Act 250 because it's an Act
Oh,
250,
that's
so
right.
for this small grading project, we still have to go through that process, but.
Maybe they'll have that 10,000 cubic yards ready by.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
And SVs, well, Mr. Sosimo, they're the gravel kings.
They too have kits, yes, we do. Yep.
Okay, next on the agenda is sketch plan review, 2018-130. Jason Abram?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to swear you in since you weren't here.
Okay.
I hereby affirm that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury. You do. Okay, and you come over here.
Can I, do I just sit here?
Can she join?
You can move over, but if you didn't get sworn in, you can't say anything.
Well, do you want to swear?
Can I
in?
get sworn in?
Yes.
Sure.
That'd be helpful.
So just
yeah.
raise your right hand.
I hereby affirm that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury.
I
Okay, you want to talk about the project and?
Yeah, so we're in the process of purchasing land in West Brattleboro, 972 Western Ave. And we were talking to Brian about what we envisioned at the property, and he showed us the cottage cluster planned unit development that the town had come up with. So we would like to apply for that and see what the requirements are, and if we can fit that or make it work with our future plans there.
Do you want me to get that? I'm gonna get this door.
Okay,
Just because of
yeah.
the noise.
Well, for sketch plan review, we can only comment on what you think you might do.
Yeah.
You'll have to come back for final approval once you get your final plans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us what you're thinking about. I mean, we have the little
You have
map.
that. Okay, yeah. So, there's a house that exists there already that we would live on one side and rent the other. And there's a building that is partially constructed that we would like to re-permit as a living space. And we would like to add, in the near future, probably 2 other small dwellings. And there's a communal space on the property, and there'd be a communal kitchen space. So communal gathering space is one building, and communal kitchen space is something else. There's shared gardens, a lot of shared pedestrian walkways and common space. And with any new buildings, we could fit whatever criteria there is for the cottage cluster development. So partly wanted to know what the specifics of that are more and what this whole process is, so I can draw up a more definitive plan for you. Not sure how much you need to know.
Anybody have any questions?
Yes, I've actually been to that C in your map.
Oh, yeah.
I was asked to videotape something. It actually
Cool.
didn't come through. So it's interesting. It's an interesting little structure that I don't know when that was built. I drove by on Bonnievale to see if I could sort of see the property, because I remembered it, that little structure. It's a octagon,
That's right. Yeah.
octagon shape.
Mhm.
And then what I noticed, the property kind of sits almost like a little bit on a hill. So I suppose that when you come off Western Ave, you're sort of going up a little bit. And then I'm just curious from your map, because I wasn't aware of it. Again, I had the memory of the property. Ivy Lane, is that an access? Does Ivy Lane come off of Greenleaf Street?
It does, and I think I wrote something about that in the proposal. I'm not sure, but we would like to bring in a driveway off there, because as of now we have a right-of-way off Western Ave,
Okay.
and we want to get rid of. So if you can see on the map, here's an older map. It's not updated so much, but this is the current driveway, and there's a loop here now.
Mhm.
So we would get rid of the loop here
I see.
and make that like a garden space with benches and such. Because it's kind of central between the buildings at this point. And then bring in a driveway off of Ivy Lane up here
Okay.
to service the bedroom, this 3-bedroom, and then possibly like a handicap access to the more community center. That may not happen, but it's a possibility. And then keep this driveway from Western Ave, but make it smaller. And that would be access to the studio down here. And we're thinking about future buildings, possibly in here, or up on the hill at this point. So there'd be 2 accesses, and the new electrical service would come from Ivy Lane. I talked to Green Mountain Power about that, and they actually have upgraded the service on Ivy Lane, thinking that would happen someday. So they're ready to make that happen quickly.
And then just for me to ask, Ivy Lane is just a town dead-end street, I guess.
Yeah.
It terminates at
No one
this
really owns
property.
it. Yeah.
So it's a town street, I assume?
No. It's, no. They have a co-op.
Is it private?
It's private.
It's a private drive,
Yeah.
okay. Huh. I
And you
guess
have a
it-
right of way to that?
Yeah. Yeah.
it's one of those little streets you don't know about.
There's like a co-op for plowing it and stuff. They
Oh, I
also
see.
in and everything. Yeah.
So you
So
put
we
in the
would
money
join
and it
that.
pays for the plowing?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it works.
Yeah.
And also the proposed buildings, I think, are smaller. They're like yurt type things we were thinking. Were you thinking anything larger?
No, probably like
They're-
300-400
they would be
square
like a
feet.
small
Yeah.
structure.
Could I ask you a question, Brian, then? I mean, to me, in one sense, it seems a little unconventional, but is there any restrictions in our zoning to doing something like placing multiple yurts, or?
Yeah, so the cottage cluster PUD right now, the planned unit development, it has really narrow prescriptions on how the buildings are going to be designed.
Okay,
And the planning commission is looking at changing those standards so people can do, be a little bit more free and do more intentional communities with that
okay.
particular type of PUD. So if they adopt those changes, then something like this would fit in.
So I live in it's like a ranch house and it has a detached garage, right? And so that's just called what, residential?
Mhm.
Whereas if somebody takes their property and wants to put these multiple buildings, that becomes what's called a PUD.
You need special approval of a PUD, so
Okay.
it's a type of subdivision approval.
Sorry, this is how I learn, is I keep asking
Yeah.
questions every meetings.
So that would include something like tiny houses,
It could be used for tiny houses, yep. Mhm.
even if they're mobile?
Yeah, you could do
Okay.
sites for them, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about something like a mobile, what we're talking about, like a,
Even like if we rented a camper there or something, would that need a permit?
I think if you're renting sites for RVs, you might need certain state wastewater provisions,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure about
Okay.
that. I would specify that's something we
Yeah.
need to do.
So the cottage cluster would help allow those things, I would think.
because
Yeah.
we do have the communal bathroom space that's gonna be in the house, kitchen and bathroom on one end of the house. And that will be primarily for others who, like maybe wanna camp or, when we have a gathering and, yeah, it would be an extra kind of space for use in that way. So I'm wondering, do you still need a permit for like a caravan or somebody who parks there, a wastewater permit when we have a communal bathroom and kitchen?
I'm not sure, I think that might cover it. Yeah.
Well, it says, where did I see that? 3 to 12 around open common spaces.
Mhm. Yeah, we certainly wouldn't go more than
3 to
12.
12 in the cluster.
Yeah.
3 to 12 buildings.
Sounds like 12 is a
Yeah.
lot for
We-
this
I don't,
land.
I don't
but-
imagine more than 6 where we're
Yeah.
at. Yeah. But we could have 3 in the very near future, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so you would have to come back to us, as I understand it, to get the cottage cluster subdivision approved.
Okay.
And then, is that right?
I believe we did fill the paperwork out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some additional paperwork you'd need to put in for that as well.
Okay.
And then you would have to design more where you're gonna put things, how big they're gonna be,
Parking.
parking,
Yeah. Parking. Okay.
snow removal, where you're gonna put the snow.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything else we need
Runoff?
to know?
So say we come up with a plan for two additional theoretical buildings that we'd kind of need to wait for an investor or something to make happen. And let's say we want to change what that is slightly. Do I just need to come up with a good enough like theoretical plan now, and then we can like change that with permits in the future? Because there isn't much, we can't predict so much of it. We may be building things to cater who's interested in living there, but for now, in the immediate future, we could make a definite plan for 3 units and all the parking and utilities for that, and start with that.
Yeah, you could also do like a building envelope showing where on the plat you might put those additional future units.
Yeah, on that sheet, I put a couple dots where units may go.
Right.
Yeah, so I could make plans for what access would be to those buildings and those spots and things. And
Yeah, and
Yeah.
how large you think they're gonna be.
yeah,
Okay.
I believe there's a square footage requirement on that cottage cluster, so I'll look through the criteria again and cater to that.
Ask Brian another question. So this applicant is coming forward with, obviously it's their own individual unique thing, but this is exactly what this area of the zoning, it allows for people to do things like this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's called the PUD or the cottage cluster.
Yep.
I don't know, I just find it very interesting.
We would be the first
Yeah,
too, I
we're
believe.
really
Yeah.
interested in how this works
Yeah.
and how we can make it, happen.
We'd love to be a good model for it, and a lot
Yeah,
of people are
so
looking for something like this. so.
Whatever recommendations people
Yeah.
have, we're open to it. And curious.
I mean, you have, what's great is with the the planning department, you have a resource that wants to, work with applicants so that they can, conform with
It's
the
been
zoning
super helpful.
criteria.
Yeah.
And you were saying that there's been some talk in potential changes to the zoning. Like this sort of stuff has come up in talking about potential changes.
Yeah, the current design standards are kind of typical of what you'd see in a lot of suburban settings.
Okay.
But that's a little bit more standardized than the style of development we see in Brattleboro, so they want to loosen that up.
Okay, interesting.
So, but the question about yurts, so it has the regs have a maximum footprint,
Mm-hmm.
but I was trying to see if they had a minimum footprint, and they don't. So,
We could have a doghouse too.
There's also a shed that's not on the property now that I was wanting to bring, and I wanted to know if, I don't know, I guess it's on the map, I think, on
The
the
top
upper
right.
right, it might be drawn in there.
Mhm.
Proposed shed or workspace or
Yeah.
something location.
This would be near the Ivy Lane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's 288 square feet. It would just be, it's like a pre-built thing, just put on a gravel pad, and it'd be a workspace. So I wonder if we need a permit for that. I'll definitely put that in the,
well,
The
you can also,
proposal.
you put everything on there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then if we look at it as a whole.
uh-huh,
Okay.
yeah. Anything about the drawing in a certain scale, in a certain format? Or someone I should talk to after about that? Or just clear communication
I'm looking at Brian, I don't know the answer.
and, yeah.
You guys have seen the drawings. Do you think that's good for a conceptual plan? Do you
No.
need something more?
I definitely want to do it
Specific?
bigger,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd like something a little more detailed.
Yes.
Yeah, and larger scale.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
This is kind of hard to go off of, so.
No.
You may actually, am I correct, that they could probably use as a template some of the maps that are available here in town, am I correct? The property maps?
That's what this is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because you don't have slopes and that stuff. So.
No.
So would this size be appropriate or something larger than this to get the details? This is like.
You know, a lot of what, obviously these come from engineering firms, but oftentimes applicants give us very clear,
Yes.
you know, sort of the 11 by 17.
Yeah.
And you get slopes in there. You know, you get a sense of the land and certainly the property boundaries. And I was just curious if the town, you know, has certain maps that you could use as the template.
We do have slope maps,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Okay.
So I
if you
think
want
Maybe we
contours, we
come
could
some of
do
the
that.
resources are available for you here in the town.
Brian, I have a question for you. Is there a limit as to the footage away from the lot line that they can build?
I do not recall.
Yeah, there is, but I can't remember what it is.
I think it says in the cottage cluster thing, it kind of reiterates all those things, because there's slightly different requirements for spacing between buildings on the lot.
Yeah,
With the
I
cottage
think
cluster.
Dave,
Cottage
Mr. Whittle's
cluster
talking
area.
about close to your abutters.
Yeah.
How close to your abutters you can.
Yeah.
And there is a requirement, I can't remember what it is offhand, but we offered a waiver, we did a waiver on a property a year or two ago,
Yeah.
where the
Specifically
garage
say-
or the house was
Yeah.
very close to the property line. So, and I can't remember what the footage is right now, but
I think 10 or 15, right? Something like that.
Those requirements for distance from the abutters would be found in that zoning district's guidelines, is that correct?
There's the zoning district guidelines, but I'm not sure if there are additional standards for the cottage cluster.
Yeah, I'm reading
I-
through the common cluster, cottage cluster, and it doesn't seem to indicate those,
I
so
think
maybe it's
it'll
just
be in the
under.
residential neighborhood
Okay.
Yeah,
section.
so is that, from my understanding, is since the cottage cluster, or PUD, is allowed within certain zoning requirements, so it's essentially like, here's the overlying zoning rules for this zoning district, and then here are the requirements for this cottage cluster.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a,
You have it exactly. Yep, that's
Okay.
it.
all right.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
That you have this sort of
Yeah.
zoning rules for that district, and then there are the certain requirements under this cottage
Mhm.
cluster section.
And it's basically, it's all online, I believe, in a book like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Any other comments or guidance for them?
First I've seen.
It's a chance to use these new regulations, right?
Yeah. So you will prepare your plan and run it,
Run it
work
by
with
Brian, yeah.
Brian, and then, some point, you'll get on the agenda and we'll,
Hopefully next
The
month,
next one,
every third
the-
Monday, yeah?
Yep.
yeah.
Agreed.
There's a deadline for getting your materials in. I don't know,
It's a week before?
no, it's,
No, it's actually coming up, I think, at maybe the end of this week.
Okay.
yeah, so you might be October.
Okay. But if I do get it done by this deadline, is it guaranteed you can look at it? Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We'll work to get that done.
Yeah.
Put it on the agenda.
Mm.
Okay,
Awesome, thank you.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks so much.
Brian, how can
any
we
other,
find out that deadline exactly?
Do you want to just shoot me an email?
Yeah.
any other business?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.